All right, so are you ready to explore some, like, seriously puzzling cultural
Oh,
practices?
yeah.
Things like food taboos and bizarre rituals that just seem totally irrational,
Right.
like on the surface?
Right.
So today we're diving deep into Marvin Harris's Cows, Pigs, Wars, and Witches
Oh, cool.
to see if we can uncover the hidden logic behind them.
Sounds good.
We're using excerpts from the 1974 first edition published by Random House.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. So Harrison Anthropologist makes a pretty compelling argument
okay.
that there are practical, often ecological explanations for these seemingly strange customs.
So, okay, let's jump right in.
Okay.
One of the most perplexing examples that Harris tackles
Mm-hmm.
is the Hindu veneration of cows in India.
Right?
They refuse to eat beef, even in times of famine.
Yeah.
How can that possibly make
It
sense?
seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But Harris argues that the Indian zebu cow is actually more valuable alive than dead.
Oh, okay, I'm listening.
Like, these cows are incredibly well adapted to the harsh Indian climate. They don't produce as much milk as American dairy cows,
Uh-huh.
but they're incredibly efficient,
Yep.
providing essential resources like milk dung for fuel and fertilizer.
Wow.
And they even provide oxen for plowing.
So it's like a whole sustainable system built around the cow.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it goes beyond just the practical benefits.
Okay.
Cows are also a form of living capital for poor farmers,
Interesting.
allowing them to scavenge for resources and even earn a living in cities.
Ah.
Harris even talks about police in Madras rounding up stray cattle for the elderly who rely on them for income.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
But if this system is so efficient, why do we often hear about famine in India?
Right?
It seems like if cows are so valuable, there shouldn't be a food scarcity issue.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of the debate surrounding this practice.
Okay.
Harris acknowledges the complexities,
Okay.
describing communal riots over cow slaughter
Oh, wow.
and the economic devastation that sending useless cows to slaughterhouses can cause.
Oh, gosh.
He argues that the system works on a long-term ecological scale,
Mm-hmm.
even if it leads to short-term suffering.
Okay.
It's about preserving a way of life that has sustained them for centuries.
So what you're saying is that something that seems inefficient on the surface
Right.
might actually be incredibly efficient when you look at the bigger picture.
Precisely. The Indian agricultural system, centered around the cow,
Mm-hmm.
is remarkably energy efficient,
Okay.
especially compared to the energy-intensive American beef industry.
Huh. Interesting.
It's about adapting to the resources you have, not trying to force a system that might not be sustainable in the long run.
All right. So we've got cow lovers in India, but then we've got cultures that absolutely hate pigs.
Right.
Why is there such a stark contrast in how different societies view these animals?
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's start with the taboo against pork in Judaism.
Okay.
Initially, it was thought to be about avoiding trichinosis, a parasitic disease. But Harris points out that some reform-minded Jews see this as outdated
Right.
and argue that there must be other reasons.
So what about Muslims?
Yeah.
They also avoid pork, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And Harris offers an ecological explanation for this.
Okay.
Pigs just aren't well suited to the arid environments of the Middle East.
Interesting.
They compete with humans for food and water,
Mm-hmm.
require shade,
Okay.
and can damage the land.
Right.
In a resource-scarce environment, keeping pigs just doesn't make sense.
It's interesting how the environment dictates those cultural practices, isn't it?
Yeah,
But wait, doesn't Harris also talk about a tribe in New Guinea that's obsessed with pigs?
he does.
Okay.
The Tsembaga are a great example of how a seemingly similar animal can hold completely different cultural significance,
Wow.
depending on the environment and social structure.
Right, you tell me about these pig-loving warriors.
Well, for the Tsembaga, pigs are central to their culture.
Okay.
The women raise them specifically for a ritual feast called the Kaiko.
So it's not just about bacon and pork chops.
Not at all.
No.
This feast has important social and ecological functions.
Mm-hmm.
First, it helps regulate the pig population,
Okay.
ensuring that they don't overtax their resources.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The Tsembaga actually plan their wars around pig populations.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
They go to war over pigs?
Not exactly over pigs,
Okay.
but the timing of the Kaiko and the resulting increase in pig population
Okay.
play a role in their decisions about when and why to engage in warfare. It's a way of maintaining alliances, managing resources, and asserting territorial claims, all tied into this one ritual.
Wow. I never would have guessed that pig populations could influence warfare.
Yeah?
But if it's not just about the pigs, what's
Yeah.
really driving these conflicts?
Harris argues that mirroring warfare, the type of warfare practiced by the Sembaga,
Okay.
is rooted in ecological pressures like resource scarcity and population growth.
Right?
These factors create tension and competition between groups.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But isn't warfare destructive?
Mm-hmm.
How does it contribute to ecological balance?
That's the surprising part.
Okay.
While it seems counterintuitive, Harris argues that warfare in this context acts as a sort of pressure valve.
Okay.
It helps limit population growth
Huh.
and prevents irreversible damage to the environment
Okay.
by keeping resource competition in check.
So a practice that seems brutal and chaotic is actually a way of maintaining order in their ecosystem.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this gets to a broader point that Harris makes throughout the book.
Okay.
We have to look beyond the surface to understand the deeper logic at play in cultural practices.
Okay, so we've tackled cows and pigs,
Yeah.
but humans themselves can be pretty puzzling,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the seemingly universal pattern of male dominance.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that such a common thread across cultures?
It's a question that has puzzled anthropologists for a long time.
Right.
We lack the biological weaponry for dominance like other species, yet men often hold more power than women.
Yeah.
Harris explores this through the example of the Yanomamo of the Amazon,
Okay.
a tribe known for its violence and male-dominated culture.
What's their culture like?
It's pretty intense.
Okay.
Think male chauvinism, wife-beating, ritual chest pounding,
Oh my gosh.
and a very high value placed on male children.
Okay.
It's a stark example of male dominance in action.
That sounds pretty harsh.
Yeah.
But how does Harris connect this back to his ecological framework?
He argues that the abundance of resources in their environment plays a key role.
Okay.
When resources are readily available, it leads to more sedentary lifestyles,
Okay.
which in turn increases competition for land and women.
Right.
This competition fuels warfare and reinforces male dominance,
Okay.
as men take on the roles of warriors and protectors.
So in a way, their environment is actually contributing to these patterns of violence and inequality.
That's what Harris suggests.
Wow.
And it highlights how complex these cultural dynamics can be. It's not always about simple cause and effect.
Okay, so far we've seen how practical concerns can explain seemingly irrational behavior. But what about practices that seem completely over the top?
Right.
I'm thinking of the potlatch, where the richest guy throws massive parties just to give everything away.
The potlatch, practiced by the Kwakiutl of the Northwest Coast,
Okay.
is a great example of what seems like irrational behavior on the surface,
Right.
but it has a fascinating underlying logic.
I mean, they were known for burning blankets, smashing canoes, even killing slurs to show off their wealth.
Right.
How can that be considered practical?
It's certainly shocking,
Yeah.
but Harris links the potlatch to the fluctuating resource abundance in their environment.
Okay.
He sees it as a form of wealth redistribution
Okay.
and a way to build alliances that could help them survive during lean times.
So by giving away their wealth, they were actually ensuring their long-term survival.
Exactly.
Well, it's like a cultural safety net.
And it highlights the importance of understanding the context in which these practices take place.
Right.
What seems irrational to us might be a perfectly sensible adaptation to their specific circumstances.
This is really making me rethink my assumptions about different cultures.
Yeah.
So before we move on, can you quickly remind me what book we're deep diving into today?
Of course. We're
Yeah.
exploring cows, pigs, wars, and witches. The Riddles of Culture by Marvin Harris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we've seen, there are a lot of riddles to unpack.
Yeah.
But so far, Harris is making a pretty strong case that even the most seemingly irrational customs often have a practical basis.
He is indeed.
Okay.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll continue to explore these fascinating connections
Okay.
between ecology, economics, and culture.
Okay.
We'll delve into cargo cults, messianic movements, and the witch craze in Europe
Okay.
to see if Harris's framework holds up.
I can't wait. This is
Yeah.
going to be good.
It is. Yeah. So we've seen how environmental and economic factors can shape cultural practices in surprising ways.
Right.
But what about beliefs?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been talking a lot about practical things like food and resources. But what about the supernatural?
Yeah.
Does Harris address things like witchcraft and religion?
He absolutely does.
Oh, wow.
In fact, he tackles one of the most perplexing phenomena of all,
Okay.
the European witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries.
Okay, so we're going from cows and pigs to witches.
Yeah.
How does that fit into the whole ecology and culture thing?
Well, Harris argues that the witch hunts
Yeah.
weren't simply a product of religious fanaticism or superstition.
Right.
He digs deeper,
Okay.
looking at the social and economic upheavals of the time
Mm-hmm.
to see if there were any underlying material conditions
Okay.
that might have contributed to this frenzy.
So it's not just about blaming the devil.
Exactly.
Okay.
Harris points to major events like the Protestant Reformation, the rise of capitalism, and
Okay.
even the Little Ice Age.
Wow.
These events created a climate of fear, uncertainty, and social unrest.
Okay.
People were looking for someone to blame for their misfortunes.
And women, especially those on the margins of society, became the scapegoats?
Sadly, yes.
Oh.
It was often the poor, the elderly, the healers, and the midwives who were accused of witchcraft.
Oh, wow.
They were easy targets, often lacking the social standing to defend themselves.
Like all this societal anxiety was projected onto these vulnerable women.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And what's even more disturbing
Okay.
is that Harris suggests that the witch hunts were used to reinforce existing power structures,
Oh, wow.
both religious and secular.
So it wasn't just about eradicating evil,
Right.
but about controlling those who didn't fit in or who threatened the established order.
Exactly. And Harris highlights the horrific role of torture
Oh, God.
in shaping the confessions of accused witches.
Right.
Under duress, people will say anything to make the pain stop. Yeah.
So these confessions weren't necessarily reliable.
It's a chilling reminder of how fear and power can be used to justify terrible things.
Yeah.
So are you saying that the image of the witch flying on boomsticks consorting with the devil
Right.
was largely a fabrication?
That's what Harris argues.
Wow.
He sees it as a product of fear coercion
Right.
and a desire to explain the unexplainable in a time of great social upheaval.
Okay, so we've seen how Harris applies his framework to some pretty extreme cultural phenomena.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears for a moment
Okay.
and talk about something a little different.
Okay.
Cargo cults.
Right.
These arose in Melanesia and New Guinea after World War II, right?
You got it.
Okay.
And they're another great example of how seemingly bizarre beliefs
Okay.
can arise from very real material circumstances.
So remind me what cargo cults are all about.
Imagine witnessing the arrival of planes
Okay.
laden with incredible goods during the war, and then suddenly the planes stopped coming.
For the indigenous peoples who had come to rely on these goods,
Yeah.
it was like magic had disappeared.
Right.
They started building mock airstrips and performing rituals
Yeah.
to try to summon the cargo back.
It's like they were trying to replicate the conditions
Yeah.
that brought them wealth and technology,
All right.
but they didn't understand the underlying mechanisms.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's what's so fascinating about cargo cults.
Okay.
They demonstrate a basic understanding of the link between work and reward. The natives had worked for the colonial powers
Right.
and received cargo in return.
Okay.
They just didn't grasp the complexities of industrial production and global trade.
So it's a tragic example of how a clash of cultures
Yeah.
can lead to misunderstanding and even despair.
Yes, and it highlights how important it is
Okay.
to consider the historical and economic context when trying to understand these seemingly strange beliefs.
All right. So we've got witches in Europe and cargo cults in the Pacific.
Right.
What's next on Harris's cultural tour?
Well, he goes on to explore messianic movements,
Right.
focusing on the history of Jewish messianism.
Okay.
He looks at figures from King David
Right.
to the zealot bandits of Jesus' time,
Okay.
trying to understand the conditions that give rise to these movements.
I'm intrigued. What's the connection between messiahs and the other cultural phenomena we've been discussing?
Harris sees a common thread:
Wait.
social and economic distress.
Right.
Whether it's famine, war, or the sudden disruption of traditional ways of life, people often turn to messianic figures for hope in times of upheaval.
So it's not just about blind faith,
Right.
but about a deep-seated human need for security and a better future.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Harris points out that these movements often emerge when people feel like their traditional systems of power and authority have failed them.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I'm a little surprised to hear Harris talking about Jesus in this context.
Yeah.
Isn't that getting a bit too close to religion for a book about cultural materialism?
It might seem that way, but Harris approaches Jesus from a historical perspective,
Right.
using the writings of Josephus,
Right.
first-century historian,
Right.
to suggest that Jesus may have been more of a militant Messiah
Okay.
than the peaceful figure often portrayed in traditional Christian narratives.
Right.
He's looking for the social and political factors that might have shaped Jesus' movement.
That's a pretty radical interpretation.
Yeah.
So what's the takeaway from all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that all religious beliefs can be boiled down to material concerns?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
And Harris doesn't necessarily provide a definitive answer.
Right.
He's simply offering a framework for understanding how material conditions can shape beliefs and behaviors,
Okay.
even in the realm of the seemingly supernatural.
Okay. I'm starting to see how all of these seemingly disparate pieces fit together.
Yeah.
But what does this all mean for us?
Mm-hmm.
Why should we care about understanding the riddles of culture?
Well, for one thing, it helps us overcome ethnocentrism.
Okay.
By understanding the logic behind other cultures' practices,
Right.
we can challenge our own assumptions
Okay.
and develop greater empathy for people who are different from us.
So instead of judging other cultures,
Right.
we can try to see the world from their perspective.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it also makes us more aware of the interconnectedness of human societies and the natural environment.
Right.
The challenges facing one part of the world ultimately affect us all.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, some of the things we've talked about today are pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
Warfare, witch hunts, oppression.
Right.
It makes you wonder if there's any hope for humanity.
I understand that feeling.
Yeah.
But I think Harris's work is ultimately a message of hope.
Okay.
By understanding the material conditions that shape our behavior,
Right.
we can work to create a more just and sustainable world.
Okay.
It's not about saying that everything is predetermined, but about recognizing the power we have to change things.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
But where do we even begin?
I think the first step is awareness.
Okay.
We need to be critical thinkers, to question assumptions,
Right.
and to look beyond the surface, to
Right.
understand the complex interplay of factors that shape human behavior.
It's like we need to become cultural detectives,
Exactly.
always searching for the hidden logic behind the riddles of culture.
And that's what makes this exploration so fascinating.
Yeah.
It challenges us to expand our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
All right. I'm ready to keep digging.
Okay.
What other riddles does Harris have in store for us
Okay.
in the last part of our deep dive?
Well, we've touched on some pretty weighty topics.
Yeah.
But we haven't gotten to the witches yet.
Oh, right.
In the final part, we'll delve deeper into Harris's analysis of witchcraft
Okay.
and explore his overall message about the power of cultural materialism
Right.
to explain human behavior.
Sounds intriguing. I can't wait to see what other surprises we uncover.
It'll be good.
So we've journeyed from the plains of India to the rainforests of the Amazon,
Yeah.
from the shores of New Guinea to the heart of Europe,
Right.
all in an attempt to unravel the riddles of culture.
Right.
And
Yeah, we've seen how Marvin Harris uses his cultural materialist approach to explain everything from food taboos to warfare,
yeah,
from cargo cults to messianic movements,
right.
and even the witch craze in Europe.
It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, it has.
And I have to admit, my brain is a bit full.
I can imagine.
So before we wrap things up, I'd love to revisit the idea of witchcraft.
Okay, sure.
It's such a potent symbol,
It is.
and I'm still trying to wrap my head around Harris's take on it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one of the most fascinating and disturbing phenomena Harris tackles in the book.
Right.
And it really showcases his commitment to finding material explanations for even the most seemingly supernatural beliefs.
Okay. So remind me again, how does Harris explain the witch craze that swept through Europe?
Well, he argues that the witch hunts were not simply a product of religious zealotry or superstition.
Right.
Instead, he points to the deep social and economic anxieties of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the massive changes happening in Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries.
Okay.
The Protestant Reformation,
Right.
the rise of capitalism,
Yeah.
the Little Ice Age.
Right.
All of these things were creating instability and fear.
But people were looking for someone to blame.
Exactly.
Right.
And those on the margins of society, the poor, the elderly, those who were different in any way, became easy targets.
Yeah.
Women, especially those who practiced traditional healing or midwifery, were particularly vulnerable.
It's tragic how often those who are already struggling become scapegoats for society's problems.
It is, and what's even more disturbing
Oh, gosh.
is that Harris suggests that the witch hunts were used to reinforce existing power structures.
Oh, wow.
The accusations of witchcraft were often a way to silence dissent, control women, and maintain the status quo. It's like a twisted logic, you know?
Right.
If you're different, you must be dangerous,
Right.
and we need to get rid of you.
Exactly. And the use of torture to extract confessions only made the situation worse.
Right, because under duress,
Yeah.
People will say anything.
Exactly.
So those confessions can't be taken at face value.
Right. They were more a product of fear and coercion than actual evidence.
Okay, so if the witch hunts weren't really about eradicating evil,
Right.
what were they about?
Well-
What was the underlying motivation?
Harris argues that it was all about control.
Okay.
Controlling women, controlling dissent, controlling those who didn't fit in.
Right.
The witch hunts were a brutal way of maintaining order in a time of great upheaval.
Wow, it's pretty bleak.
It is.
But I guess it makes sense in a way, when people are scared and uncertain,
Right.
they often lash out at those who seem different or threatening.
It's a sad truth about human nature, and it highlights the importance of critical thinking
Right.
and questioning assumptions.
Yeah. We can't just accept things at face value,
Right.
especially when those things are being used to justify violence and oppression.
Yeah, you're right. We have a responsibility to look beyond the surface and ask tough questions about the motivations behind these kinds of beliefs and practices.
Will you?
So if Harris is right,
Mm-hmm.
and the witch craze was more about social control than actual witchcraft,
Right.
what does that tell us about the power of cultural materialism to explain these seemingly irrational phenomena?
I think it strengthens his argument.
Okay.
By looking at the material conditions, the
Yeah.
economic anxieties, the social upheavals, the power dynamics, we can start to make sense of even the most bizarre and disturbing cultural practices.
It's like he's saying, don't dismiss the seemingly irrational.
Right.
There's often a deeper logic at work,
Yeah.
even if it's a logic that's based on fear, greed, or the desire for control.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most valuable takeaways from Harris's work.
Yeah.
It challenges us to be more skeptical, to question assumptions, and to look for the hidden connections between our beliefs, our behaviors,
Right.
and the material world around us.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
Cows, pigs, wars, witches, cargo cults, messiahs.
Yeah,
The list goes on.
it does.
But what's the big takeaway?
Yeah, what do you hope our listeners will remember
Yeah,
from this deep dive into Marvin Harris's work?
exactly.
I think the key message is this
Sure.
culture is not just a random collection of customs and beliefs.
Right.
It's a complex system that has evolved over time to help us adapt to our environment and solve problems.
Right.
And while some cultural practices may seem strange or even repulsive to us,
Yeah.
they often make sense when we consider the context in which they arose.
So it's all about understanding the bigger picture,
Right.
the ecological, economic, and social forces that shape human behavior.
Exactly. And I think that's a powerful message.
Yeah, it is.
It gives us a framework for understanding not only other cultures,
Right.
but also our own. It helps us see the connections between our beliefs, our actions, and the world around us.
It's like taking the blinders off and seeing the world with fresh eyes.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that's what Harris is trying to do with his work, to help us see the world more clearly, more critically, and with greater understanding.
Well said.
Thank you.
I think that's a perfect note to end on.
It is.
So to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the riddles of culture.
Yes, thank you.
We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to look for the hidden logic in the world around you.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Until next time, happy deep diving.
Happy deep diving.